Says that we're live. I've had to do some work myself with letting go of some of the stuff behind the scenes and just focusing right at the camera. Although I realize now you're looking at one of the images. So let me switch that back real quick. And I just wanted to say hi so you can see me. I'm going to do a couple of things back and forth, but I've learned, a good friend has let me know, or helped me to realize that that I'm so used to being behind the camera and not in front of it. So having to be just in front of it and behind it, I am getting used to that. I'm also getting used to some other things I would be doing behind the scenes that I'm going to try and let go, so that it's just me and you, the camera. You'll be seeing some stuff over here, though. I wanted to go through some images first. These, and of course one of them is not here. These images, I always like starting with images so we can kind of get a sense of what we're looking at, you know? And that's a project. Okay. Just checking, making sure this is all still going. You're right here at the early stages. This is like the pre-live. This is making sure we're live and everything's okay. I want to edit that though. Don't worry, you didn't just come on here to see me work, I promise. Let's go back here on that. Alright, so image time. This is the Jesus platform. What would Jesus say about the issues facing our world today in the 21st century? If we transplanted Jesus today, what would he say? We don't know. We got to guess. But using the Bible, crazy idea, but we're going to use the Bible to see what it tells us about Jesus. And we've been looking at things facing us as a people, as a country. This week we'll talk about hunger a little bit, and we're going to look at the Gospel of John. First is our image time. Preview the program. So you're behind a little bit, and I shouldn't be looking. I look fine there, and I'm trying not to look at the messages either. There's a lot of things happening in life. So to get over all of that, I'm going to try to get this kind of, so I can look at something else. So nothing is distracting me from looking at you. That's really it. But I gotta see what you see. This is some of the earliest images that we have of the story of Jesus are these stories of his breaking the bread and sharing the fish. The miracle, they say. Feeding the multitudes. That's, when you look at the earliest images of Jesus, the earliest images from the catacombs in 1st century Rome, 1st, 2nd century Roman Empire, they are obsessed with this story. Feeding the multitudes. It's kind of hard to underestimate how important it was, how much the early church took this story as being core to our faith, right? Feeding the multitudes, feeding 5,000, 4,000. It is the only miracle story in all 4 Gospels. And all 4 Gospels share very little. So what is it? Sorry for the white Jesus, and this isn't my question. This is just an image I got. What are we feeding the multitudes? Although it's a good question. What are we feeding them? But the essence here is the feeding essence of it, right? Feeding. What I contend is that these stories all come down to this fantastic meme that I wish I knew who had done it. But this is really where it's at. This is the idea. This is what it means when we go down the rabbit holes of what would Jesus say about this particular thing. When we try to scour the Bible for it, I think one of the best ways that we can engage with this story is to look at what the early Christians were about. The things they drew on the catacombs. The things that they treasured when the authorities were running after them. When the authorities were arresting them, feeding them to lions. These are the stories. And so this meme here, right? We can't feed all these people. That would only create dependency. I didn't have to take very long to look up some of the other platforms in this country, specifically the Grand Old Party, when it comes to how we look at feeding others. So a couple things about John, on how distinctive a gospel that John is. When we're looking at John, and I did do this specifically, I'm going to keep that image up for one more second, and we'll go back here so that I can do a little auto and make sure that, oh wait, stop that because we want to get this off and this out. Go auto. So again, you're looking at me, and this time I'm changing the background. I don't need to tell you what I'm doing. I'm just going to do it. Yeah, so where were we? I know exactly where we were. Stop looking at other things, Jason. Stop getting distracted, Jason. Take a drink, Jason. Hi. John is so unique. John is so different than the other three Gospels, the synoptics, that's what we call them. John is totally separate, completely out of the depth of that, probably written almost a generation later. Jesus and John is weird, right? The best stories in it. John doesn't have a communion story, so it's said there's no Eucharist. For John's Jesus, it's washing the feet. It's literally something he commanded, which is one of the big aspects of, as Lutheran, what Lutherans consider sacraments. One of the questions we ask is, did Jesus order it? Did he command it? Well, he literally commanded us to wash each other's feet, but how many of us do that? Baptists and others kind of definitely rock that. John, but anyway, in that story, Jesus is so ethereal and mystical. Jesus knowing what to happen to him and having on the table, took off his outer robe, right? And in John, Jesus knows everything, what's going to happen. Hard Nostradamus feels. But the distinctiveness of John is both a gospel and a guide for Christians particularly. So we'll get to hunger in a second, but I want to focus on how important it is for us to understand that his so particular that sometimes we use entirely out of context. Maybe it's a big favorite. They don't do it as much holding up the signs at the games, but it's a big deal. And in that, Jesus says, nobody comes to the Father except through me. He's being very particular in first and second century Christians, right? And now I'm making sure things are okay. I'm trying not to go back and forth here. Okay, we're back. Putting on both hats. In fact, it's easily that John could have been written even a little bit later, into the second century. The ways in which John wrote and how entirely out of context now, right? trying to use John as exclusive when that community, Jesus was speaking to a people. Disciples are representing a people who are in like Jesus. Maybe a citizen like Paul. There's a lot of different layers that go on here, right? Jesus is very, very weird, and we have to focus on his weirdness before we get into what maybe about hunger today, and what his plan on hunger would be. Here, I'll stop the auto switch for a second and come in behind the scenes just to show this and how often have been encouraged and kind of told to think this way about miracles that he does, about Jesus and how he relates to other people, right? We've made a Republican, very white American citizen Jesus, when we're just talking about in the Gospel of John how particular, because those people were not on the they were not in citizens. They didn't grow up in castles. John's Jesus is important to recognize. And so, with that in mind, that John also includes this story, this very, very early story, and we've seen these too, right? Early images of, oops, that's me behind you. Hi! No. Early Christians, when they drew Christian art, when they drew art of the stories that had given them hope, they told this story of the feeding of the multitudes. John includes this story as well. This story, just a pure miracle in some ways, right? And yet, and this story is so meaningful in the debate around food, right? So, two quick pieces here. First is a piece about Jesus and John. This is from Jesus does not simply speak God's words and do God's works. Rather, he does those things because he is God's word and work in the world. Jesus' words and work gives the world in the incarnate Jesus, this incarnate Jesus. I keep forgetting that I'm also behind the screen here. Here we go. Back to auto. Beloved. Platforms we hear today, either the very polished ones of the Democrats that might not do as much as we would hope, or the outright 1984 doublespeak. People who are on food stamps, people who are struggling to make ends meet, who are food insecure. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. John gives us a lot of prefaces, y'all. Sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now,